Hello, today I'll be reading the book called Killer Sharks by Cullimore. Chapter 1, The Dolphins. Bob Brown turned to his dad. "Can I steer the boat now?" His dad shook his head. "Not yet. Your sister still has 5 minutes left." Bob looked at the three fishing rods hanging over the edge of the boat and groaned. "Fishing is boring." "We haven't even started yet," his dad replied. "How can you be bored?" "We're on a speedboat," added his dad. "The sun's shining. We're in the middle of the deep blue sea, having a great vacation. You should be thrilled." "He will be when he gets to steer the boat," muttered Hannah. Bob scowled at his little sister. Their dad moved his arm across Bob's wrist and pointed out to sea. "I think we'll stop over there." "Great," said Bob. "What's the time?" asked his dad. Bob looked at his watch. "Hey, my watch is gone." "Here it is," his dad grinned, holding it up. Bob reached for the watch and shook his head. "Give it back, Dad, and stop doing stupid magic tricks." "It's not a magic trick," said Hannah. "He just took it without you seeing him." She put her arm around her dad. "You could have been a great pickpocket, Dad." "Thanks," he grinned. "Having quick fingers can be useful in my line of work, too." Bob put his watch back on it and looked at it. "Hey, it's my turn now." Hannah let go of the wheel, and Bob took over. He pushed the lever beside the wheel, and the motor roared. The boat shot across the water. "Now this is more like it," shouted Bob over the noise. "Look!" cried Hannah. "Dolphins!" Bob slowed the boat as the 5 dolphins swam in front of it. "Are they the kind you work with, Dad?" asked Hannah. Their dad shrugged. "You know, he can't talk about his work," Bob sighed. "He's Mr. Brown's secret agent." "Not quite, but that's the trouble with working for the Navy." "There, Dad." Mr. Brown smiled. "Now, if I was a pickpocket, I'd tell you all about my work." Suddenly, the dolphins stopped playing beside the boat and dived out of sight. "Where are they swimming away?" cried Hannah. "I wanted to get out and swim with them," she added. "You're not swimming out there," said Mr. Brown. "Look." He pointed at several large shark fins that were cutting across the water. They were heading right for the boat. Chapter 2, Shark Attack. The sharks circled the boat. "Don't move," whispered Mr. Brown. He lifted a lid in the bottom of the boat and pulled out a large orange bag. "What's that?" "It's a life raft," asked Hannah. "What's that?" asked Hannah. "It's a life raft," Bob answered. One of the sharks bumped against the boat. Hannah fell to the floor. Her dad helped her up. "I don't like the looks of this," he muttered. Another shark bumped the boat. There was a loud click. Their dad pulled a cord. The life raft began to inflate. A ticking sound came from under the boat. "What are they doing, Dad?" asked Bob. "Get in," Mr. Brown ordered. He pushed the life raft into the water. They all climbed in, and Mr. Brown started rowing as fast as he could. "This is crazy," shouted Bob. "What about the sharks?" "I work with sharks," said Mr. Brown quietly. "These have been trained, I can tell." "To do what?" asked Hannah. "To carry mines and blow up boats," Mr. Brown exclaimed. Suddenly, the sharks all dived away from the boat. The ticking got louder. "Heads up!" shouted Mr. Brown. Seconds later, there was an explosion. Hannah and Bob looked up just in time to see the boat sink into the sea. The noise drew their gaze up as a helicopter flew into view. It lowered a ladder near the life raft. Mr. Brown looked worried. "We might as well climb up, kids, but I don't think I'm going to like what we'll see at the top." Chapter 3. Mr. Gal. Once they got inside the helicopter, Mr. Brown groaned. I thought it might be you, Mr. Gal, Mr. Brown said. The man he was talking to was short with long white hair. He threw back his head and laughed. "Mr. Gal, to you." The man looked at Hannah and Bob. "So, Mr. Brown, are these your children?" he sneered. Bob clenched his fist. "Yes, we are. What are you going to do about it?" Mr. Gal smiled. "Well, as long as your dad tells me what I want to know, nothing." He shrugged. "But if he won't, who knows?" Mr. Brown put his arm around Bob and Hannah. "I'm not telling you anything, Gal." Mr. Gal reached into his pocket and pulled out a little box. It looked like a cell phone. "Have you ever seen one of these, Mr. Brown?" he asked. Mr. Brown nodded slowly. "You know I have. I invented them." Bob and Hannah looked at their dad surprised. Mr. Gal smiled at the two children. It was an evil smile. "This little box can be used to control those sharks down there," he said quietly. "With this clever little thing, I can make them swim wherever I want them to. I can also make them attack whatever I want them to." Bob and Hannah gasped and looked at their dad. Mr. Gal put the little box back in his pocket. "Now, children, I want your dad to help me invent a new box, one that has even greater range." Mr. Brown shook his head. "No!" Mr. Gal sighed. "I thought you might say that." Without any warning, Mr. Gal turned and pushed Bob. The boy fell out of the helicopter door with a cry. Mr. Brown rushed forward and leaned out. Bob hung from the ladder. "You could have killed him," shouted Mr. Brown. Mr. Gal pulled out a gun. "What do you say now, Mr. Brown?" Mr. Brown shook his head again. Mr. Gal quickly turned and pushed Hannah out of the helicopter. Mr. Brown cried out. Mr. Gal laughed and looked out the window. "Well, I can see the girl. She's in the life raft, but the boy is nowhere to be seen." He laughed again. "Maybe the sharks got him." "No, they haven't," cried Bob. He was climbing up the ladder. He was almost back inside the helicopter. "Mr. Brown, why don't you help your son?" Mr. Gal said. Mr. Brown pushed past Mr. Gal, bumping it against him as he went. "Watch out, you clumsy fool," snarled the short man. Mr. Brown leaned out and grabbed Bob by the hand. At that moment, Mr. Gal shoved him. "Ah!" cried Mr. Brown as he and Tom tumbled out of the helicopter. They splashed into water next to the raft. Hannah quickly helped them in. They looked out and saw a row of fins getting near. The sharks were moving. Chapter 4. Come and get it. "How are you doing down there?" asked Mr. Gal, leaning out of the helicopter. "Get lost," shouted Bob. "It's okay," said Mr. Brown. "He can't harm us now." Mr. Gal smiled. "Maybe I can't, but my killer sharks can," he laughed. "I think it's time for them to attack you." Mr. Gal put his hand into his pocket. He frowned. He tried his pocket and then frowned again. "Looking for this?" asked Mr. Brown. He held up the little box that controlled the shark. "How did you get that?" Mr. Gal asked angrily. Mr. Brown grinned. "I picked your pocket," he said. "Aren't you the clever one?" Mr. Gal hissed. Hannah nodded. "Yes, he is." "No, he's not," snapped Mr. Gal. "He's just wasting my time." He aimed the gun at Mr. Gal. "Give me the controller or else." "Or else what?" shouted Bob. Mr. Gal grinned. "Or else, you young man, I'll shoot your sister." Mr. Brown groaned. "I might have known." He held out the controller. I might have known. He held out the controller. "Okay, Gal, you win." Come and get it. Mr. Gal laughed. I always win. He put his head back inside the helicopter and began to move lower. Bob, said Mr. Brown quietly. What's the thing you're holding? I don't know, Bob replied. It came off the float under the helicopter. I pulled it off by accident when I fell. Mr. Brown looked at it, the big flat plug Bob was holding. He burst out laughing. What's so funny? Asked Hannah. This is a plug, Mr. Brown grinned as he showed it to Hannah. I can't wait until Gal lands on the water. Why? Asked Hannah. Because without this plug, water will get into the float under the helicopter, said Mr. Brown. And when that happens, Bob bursts out laughing. The helicopter will turn over and sink. Exactly, said Mr. Brown. They all turned to watch as the helicopter swooped down to land, back in the life raft. Once the helicopter was resting on the sea, Mr. Gal appeared. He stood on the float and waved his gun slowly at Mr. Brown. Now the shark controller, Mr. Brown. And don't try anything, Mr. Brown sighed. What can I do from here? Mr. Gal folded his arms. Mr. Brown leaned down and picked up the paddle that was lying in the bottom of the life raft. He dipped it into the water and started to paddle towards the helicopter. Suddenly, the paddle slipped from his hands. Dad, be careful, gasped Hannah. Mr. Brown turned to her and winked. He looked down at the paddle and shrugged. Then he looked at Mr. Gal. Now what do we do? Get it out of the water, you fool, snarled Mr. Gal. Mr. Brown smiled. He could see water pouring into the floe. The helicopter started to move. Slowly, it rolled over toward the life raft. Hey, what's going on? Cried Mr. Gal as he lost his balance. He dropped his gun, which fell into the water and sank out of sight. The helicopter's skinny, said Mr. Brown calmly. What? Cried Mr. Gal. Bob held up the plug. I pulled this out of the float by accident. Sorry. You silly boy, screamed Mr. Gal. By now, the helicopter was almost upside down. Mr. Gal jumped into the water. Move over, you fools. I'm coming into the life raft. Mr. Brown bent down. He quickly pulled the paddle out of the water. I don't think so, he said, paddling away from Mr. Gal. Then he pulled out the shark controller. I think it's time to put the sharks to work. He grinned at Bob and Hannah. Don't you agree? Oh, yes, said Bob. Definitely, said Hannah. Chapter 6. Friends in Navy. What? Friends in the Navy. What's that noise? Asked Bob. It was another helicopter. Maybe they're coming to help Mr. Gal, said Hannah, looking worried. Mr. Brown shook his head. He pointed to a green flashlight on the side of the life raft. I don't think so. I set the radio beacon to send out a signal to my Navy friends at work. Sure enough, the helicopter was from the Navy. The pilot leaned out of the window and waved at Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown turned and smiled at Bob and Hannah. It's okay. He's a friend of mine. The pilot dropped the ladder down to lift the raft. Mr. Brown, Bob, and Hannah climbed into the helicopter. The pilot pulled the ladder back up. What about Mr. Gal? Asked Hannah. Are you going to leave him there? Asked Bob. They all looked down at Mr. Gal had climbed into the life raft. Mr. Brown looked thoughtful. No, he said, I'm going to set the sharks on him. To eat him? Hannah gasped. Mr. Brown grinned. No, just to tow him back to shore. They all watched as the shark closed in on the life raft. What's Mr. Gal gonna do? Asked Bob. Why is he lying down like that? Added Hannah. Mr. Brown smiled. I think he just fainted. Then he laughed. He always was afraid of sharks. Thank you for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.